Ghost Hunt at Hagood Mill in Pickens, South Carolina, June 14, 2025. Tickets are $25 and are sold on Eventbrite and in person at the Dark, Strange and Mysterious Market in Easley, SC on June 13th and 14th. Special guests for the Ghost Hunt is Brandon Cooper and Blaine Rohan. Hagood Mill is known for its rich history and mysterious activity. Can you see spirits? Can ghosts talk to you? Find out. Ghost Hunt, June 14, 2025. Tickets cost $25. We will gather at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and do a history haunting tour until midnight.
Hey, welcome everybody to Bridging the Seen and Unseen. I am your host. I am Shane McLain. How are you, Miss Gwen?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. Just sitting here with some animals and not worrying about anything because my wife's here and she won't let me do it anyway.
There you go. She's a sweetheart.
I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited about tonight. You know, I've been on this guest show and she's very interesting to me, and I enjoyed being on her show, and I wanted her to get on mine too. So let's go ahead and bring her on. Let's bring Miss Susan Victoria, Miss Lady Darkwood.
There you go.
Hey, hello.
Hey.
I was good morning, but it's afternoon, night. I don't know. What's at the time today?
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you on. I've been wanting to get you on for some time now because I've been on your show and you know, I wanted people to get the feel of well, everybody basically knows who you are anyway.
Yes.
But let's start with that. Why don't you just kind of tell everybody who you are, a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So Susan, born and raised in Boston, Mass. I've always been interested in the paranormal. I formed my group in 2004, Central Mass Paranormal Society. I actually went to an ad in the paper, and from there, you know, makes history. We've been growing strong ever since. but I felt like I've also been connected as well, spiritually. You know, I believe that I'm a clairvoyant, a clairsensitive, as well as, you know, just keeping in tuned with nature. So yeah, that sums it up.
That's you know, it's awesome because like you know, you've kind of got roots, you know, because you know you do have the abilities and everything, and you know I'm Christian and everything, and you know we call that discernment and things like that. But how have you found that you've been able to use those gifts that you have in the paranormal, and how does that work for you?
Well, I've actually was raised Catholic. I was raised by a wonderful lady, an elderly lady, for 16 years of my life. And I remember every Sunday I had to go to church, and then I went to CCD class. So I was raised as a Catholic until I got to about my teenage years, and she passed away. And then I decided to explore other religions and any, you know, just to keep a mind open.
So are you more eclectic?
I'm not sure.
She kind of is. I've been on her show also, and she's been on others. Yeah, I love
Right.
Susan.
Right.
Every day I'm trying to figure out like what I have, what I don't have. So it's like a I'm just opening up to see, you know, what else comes my way.
Well, eclectic's more on the term like you use, you know, different things from different origins or, you know, religions or things like that to benefit with what you do. I mean, like I've heard of eclectic ministers, which is kind of a conflict to me, but I mean, you know, if it works, it works. I mean, have you found, I mean, do you help like do residential cases and stuff like that too?
I do, not so much anymore. Unfortunately, all the residential cases that I was involved in was usually mental. So I would say have been to 4 or 5. The problem is they were more common back then because when my group started coming out, you know, everybody was excited. You know, the only thing on TV would be like Ghost Hunters, Taps, shows like that. So a lot of people were like, ooh, if we bring them into our house, are we going to be on TV? Like it was like a big thing back then. So I did have a lot more residential hauntings and cases. Right now, not so much so, but back then I did. Yeah, but again, majority of them, there was a lot of like health issues and mental issues involved. So
yeah, and that's, you know, that's one big thing that I'm real big with. You know, when I work cases like that, you know, I have a whole list of paperwork that I go through, and you know, mental health is really big because, you know, if a person does have mental health issues, you know, and they're experiencing paranormal or some kind of, you know, what they call demonic or anything of that nature, you know, you have to weed out, you know, the mental health parts of it, and just know that it is big in that area.
It is. And you do have to ask the questions. You know, some of the questions that we asked is, you know, is your family ever known of having any health issues? Or, you know, do you use alcohol? Do you use drugs? Things like that. We did have to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what we do. And I think anybody that does works residential cases or, you know, tries to help people, I think you should. I think you should not only, you know, do that to protect the person, but to protect, you know, yourself and, what you believe and things like that. So I mean, I think it's very smart because it's a serious issue. It really is.
Yeah.
And especially in the paranormal field, you know, because it already gets looked at, you know, because like either you have some churches that will say, oh, this is paranormal, that's demonic already. So you either got demonic or you're seriously, you have mental health issues. And you know, we're trying to break that stigma. You know, that's why I wanted this podcast, is because I wanted to bridge the gap in between things. You know, I wanted to let people know that I am interested in you. I'm interested in who you are and what you're about. And that's one thing I wanted to have you on, because, you know, I had one of my best shows that I had with, as far as questions was, and things.
Oh yeah, you were hit hard on my show.
I was.
I watched it. It was great.
I mean, a lot of people was curious, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I was hit hard on that show, but it was great to me because, you know, I love being challenged like that. I love being I like it, you know, and so I wanted to get you on. I'm not gonna, you know, get you to where we hammer things, but you're from Massachusetts and everything.
I am born and raised in Boston, Mass, with my accent.
Yeah, that's it. That accent. How is the paranormal scene in Boston?
You know, around my area, typically, because I live 40 minutes actually out of Boston, but I work in Boston. It's a lot of historical. So we have Concord, Mass, which was known for the, you know, battlefield. We have a lot of like historical places. We have the Lizzie Borden House, which is probably 40 minutes away from me. We have, you know, of course, Salem. We have, you know, the S.K. Pierce Mansion. So we do have a lot of historical places, but Concord, I would say, is more historically than the others. So,
what's your favorite? What's your favorite place to investigate?
I would say was the S.K. Pierce Mansion. You know, I did connect. I met up with Brandy Wells, which is, you know, a medium. And, you know, we actually connected with the owner, S.K. Pierce, and a couple other spirits there. And it's to believe there's at least, although I haven't come across them, there's at least 4 portals open there. So I would say that was the most, like, that's the best place I like to go. But I also just like typically go like to like a cemetery, because I find it like calming as well. Or I just, you know, head out, you know, I have a lot of woods where I am. So I like to like go out and like listen around me and tune in to like nature as well. You know, to like different tones of the birds, or, you know, see if I hear like any like animals approaching, or, you know, how the trees, the winds hit the trees, and how it hits the branches, and, you know, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I really love nature. Yeah.
I've got a team director for Outer Realms, and his name's Aaron Wing, and he may be watching. I'm not sure. But
no, but can I mention a couple people? I know Shane.
Yeah.
Shane, you're on your phone, right, Shane?
Yep.
So Shane can't see it. So, but you, let's see, we have, Sean from
Hey, Sean.
Kimmy and Jamie and
hey, guys.
Ross and Brandon Cooper.
Hey, Brandon. Thanks for coming on, guys. Thanks for coming on. This is, you know, I want to go to Boston. I have an uncle that lives or lived in South Boston, you know, because I come from a very predominant Irish family.
Yeah.
And like my grandparents came here from Ireland. So I have an uncle that has been part of some not so good people, you know, but he's supposedly out of South Boston like that. But I do definitely want to go. I love the history that's out of there, and just like you said, you know, like a lot of like colonial things, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, I definitely want to go look at that place. Let me ask you this, Susan. When did you find out about your psychic abilities?
So I don't really call myself a medium psychic. I'm just grateful for what I have. But you know, I look back to when I was growing up, and you know, back then, you know, tons of kids, you know, into today, you have imaginary friends, you know, you chit chat, you know, but back then, you know, that was just, you had an imaginary friend with that was it. But I actually was having conversations with my imaginary friend back and forth. But again, you know, people would think that you're just, you know, you're a kid growing up. It was
Yeah,
just your mindset.
you have a big imagination. Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
you do.
yes. It wasn't honestly until I had the experience after which I tampered with black magic, to be honest with you, is when it actually started opening up for me.
Wow. So you tampered with that? Well, what was your experience with that?
So I was, as growing up, you know, I wasn't, you know, I was the only child, you know, I was bullied a lot growing up. And I just felt that I needed, you know, I don't know, I felt like I just needed, you know, to have power, mind you. And I knew about witchcraft and I knew what it could do. So I actually tampered with it to the point that I did like a whole bunch of curses, you know, I did a whole bunch of spells, and it got to the point, yes, I felt like I had a lot of power. Like it felt like, I don't know, like an adrenaline rush. It felt like really like overpowering. But then I started feeling at the same time like something was like over me and it wasn't good. Even to this today, I could really describe it. It was like a black cloud just like over me. And I felt like, I don't know, I felt really angry. And then, you know, my pets around me was getting sick. And needless to say, I was doing this in my bedroom. So, which is not the best place to do it as well. So finally, you know, I got to the point that it was really like a lot for me. It was just, I felt like not really being taken over, but I felt like I was basically losing myself. So I honestly, you know, kneeled down and I just prayed. I was like, you know, I said, you know, I don't need this anymore. I want to get out of it. You know, if somebody would help me. And then all of a sudden, I remember as clear as day, that's when my spirit guide, I seen her. She came forward and, you know, my animal spirit guide, and they just kind of just in another, you know, higher being, just like pulled me completely out of it. And the next thing I know, I was like on my bed and I felt like so much lighter and so relieved. And right after that, I just like packed everything up and I just, you know, and that's when I started connecting with my spirit guides. I started getting into nature. I was practicing, but more like nature, like Wicca, Celtic. I stopped doing spells. I didn't do any more spells to, you know, against people. And then since then, I've been like opening up like more and more and more.
Do you think that that's pretty common, you know, for people that are bullied or to get abused or things like that, to kind of turn to something like that, like they don't know for that issue to get like some kind of power or something? Do you think
I
that's
mean,
common for people to do that?
I would think it's common, either that or they'll, you know, get to a really dark place and unfortunately, you know, may lead to them hurting themselves or some other thing. So I do believe that if you feel by yourself and you have no one to turn to, that's probably, you know, what you would do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so too. You know, I've seen. You know, I grew up. You know, my teenage years was in the '90s. You know, and we had what they call like goth kids and stuff like that. You know, and a lot of people would say that that they stereotype them and they were like, oh, they're weird. They're like vampire people, or they
Mhm.
practice dark magic because of the way they dress and things like that. And some of the best people that I've known, that I've met in my life, don't look like everybody else. And
Mhm.
I wish people would stop like stereotyping people by the way they dress or what they believe, and just try to understand people more. And I think it would be way more beneficial, even in the paranormal field. I see people that don't even post any evidence or anything that they do in the paranormal field because of the slack that they get by other people, in the comments and things like that. And I mean, it's kind of like a bully mentality all in itself. And
Yeah.
online, the internet is a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Mhm.
It's a blessing because it gets you to where you can network, you can reach out to a lot of people, you can have conversations with people. But then again, you always have those certain people that like to say negative things about people and just can make people like really just not want to be there anymore.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, they feel like they're an outcast.
Mhm.
And they, get in their little group and they feel like it's just in their little clique or in their little group, and they're, that's all they have within each other.
And you don't, and it's almost like you don't fit in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I definitely get it. And like you said, I love the paranormal field. So I do. I had my first experience when I was 10 years old. I saw my grandfather, and I've been looking, for answers and everything ever since. And you know, uh, people ask me, am I paranormal clergy? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I said I'm a clergy that works in the paranormal.
Yes.
Uh, I believe there is a difference. I do believe that there are some that call themselves paranormal clergy, but I've found more, if I left and I went to go and talk to a church or something like that I work in the paranormal field, they would automatically just think that I was involved in some kind of witchcraft, or I'm doing things like that. What are your thoughts behind that? What are your thoughts behind, you know, um, thinking where churches mentality are about, the demonic and things like that, calling all paranormal demonic and things like that. Where do you see in that?
Um, I don't even know. Do they still like perform exorcisms?
No, well, the Catholic Church does. The
They
Catholic
still
Church
do?
performs exorcisms. They have a different, sector or whatever where they perform, exorcisms. But a lot on the outside of, regular Christians and things, we have like deliverance ministries and stuff like that.
I
Um,
mean, I would think the church and they would still, feel that paranormal, there's spirits around, and there is such thing as the unknown. There's such thing as whether or not, we portray or we see all the time the devil having the horns and being red, but I don't think it's necessarily true. I believe that yes, there is something that may not be good, that we can't explain, but a lot of it comes from us as well. And what I mean is just basically we have control of a lot of things. We have control of the environment, pollution, crimes. We have a lot of that control, so we're doing a lot of it as well.
I do think so too, you know, and even in the Bible, you know, the Bible says that the devil comes as an angel of light, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so it's a bad misconception to think that, oh, he's got the horns and, you know, things like that, you know, because, you know, the devil is a manipulator, you know, he'll come and he'll make something look so tempting and so good, you know, that it can turn you away, and his goal is to turn your focus, everything away from God, because you know we were created in God's image. And so the devil's going to do everything that he can, you know, and he's not going to stand in front of you like with horns and stuff like that. It's going to be everything that can produce an evil intent in your life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because I was thinking to myself, you know, years and years later, I was thinking to myself, well, maybe if I was such in a dark place, maybe I, you know, made the negative, you know, maybe I projected it onto myself and maybe I created it, but I just don't know. You know, it was such an immense like darkness. Like I don't know. Could it, you know?
where do you think that came from? I mean, were you like rejecting God, or were you, you know,
I
what
was rejecting everything at that point. So
well,
I was just basically focusing on witchcraft. I wasn't allowing anything else come into my life.
mm, mm. Yeah, I've studied some witchcraft, and I've studied, you know, some dark and, you know, some light, and some people like some older people that I'll talk to, they just think that witchcraft is all dark, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and there's some people that are, you know, elementalists. There's some people that like nature, that like to work with nature, that deal with winds and, you know, things like that. And I mean, I've seen several. I know several people, especially in the paranormal field. You know, it's so vast. You know, not everybody's Christian. Not everybody's. You know, you have so many different beliefs in people, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because that should not that should not like deter you from, you know, becoming friends with that person or trying to understand, because I think it's important that we understand things like that. You know, like you, for instance, you know, you have any idea with black magic and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like to know, you know, when you got into it like that, was there just a particular time where you feeling isolated and things like that, or was it something that you felt like you were being drawn to?
Well, you know, I didn't really, I wasn't at the time really connected to my mother. We had a lot of miscommunication. And, you know, at the time also, I was bullied, and then my grandmother, who I call my grandmother that raised me, she passed away. So it was like a whole bunch of stuff together. Um, and I just, I just wanted the power to run things my way and get what I wanted. And nobody tampered with me anymore, So,
Do you think it was more on a fear level that people knew what you were doing, or do you think that it was actually working for you?
yes, well, it got to the point that I actually got in a confrontation with a woman that was bullying me like horribly. And I have to say, we got into a fight and I blacked out and I can't remember what happened to me. And then the next day, when I saw my friend that was with me, she told me that the girl was like in horrible shape. So I don't know, what happened. I only had like a little scrape on my forehead. It was just like little things like that. that kind of, you know. But then when I got to the point that, you know, my pets were getting sick and everything, then I kind of just, I needed to do something about it. It wasn't worth it. It really wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely get it. And, you know, you live next to Salem and stuff like that. You know, what's the atmosphere there? Is it more dark? Is it dark there, or what is it like in Salem?
It's very, you have your mediums, you have your psychics, although, you know, I don't know who's actually a psychic or medium there. You do have a lot of like people that are practicing. I basically walked into stores and they kind of like gave me the stare down because they kind of felt what I had or who I was. So there are a lot of, you know, people practicing there. Definitely. It's not like dark or anything like that. It's just a lot of people that are practicing either Wiccan or, you know, other types of, you know, witchcraft.
Yeah, it's you know, I definitely want to go and check that area out, you know, because I've always been fascinated with like the witch trials and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
And like when people call themselves a witch and stuff like that, I mean, do you think that people really are you know, like what does it take? What does it take to call yourself like really a witch?
So to do like, honestly, like witchcraft, the old ancient witchcraft, like black witchcraft, you basically not make, you know, a lot of people make sacrifices. A lot of people, you know, they draw a coven, they do a chant, you know, they present something, you know, for the power, or they may like, you know, present themselves or other things. But, you know, it's mainly, sometimes it's like sacrifice. You have to give a sacrifice.
Like blood issue, like
Yes.
something blood. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a really, really crazy experience when I was a kid. You know, I was born in '77, you know, so in the early '80s, you know, that was the, you know, the satanic panic. And we lived in a neighborhood, and we had a wooded area right next to the pool area that was in the back over there, and it was a clearing that was back, and there were a bunch of trees that were kind of, and me and a couple friends went back there, and we saw this. I've never seen a pentagram this big. It was made of like 2x4s and everything. This thing had to have been 50 feet. You know, and they had all these little tubes and stuff being hooked up that led to the middle of the pentagram or whatever. And when we went back there, they had a cat hanging up, and the cat was dripping down into the pentagram.
A real one?
A real one. A real one. Like they had sacrificed this cat right there, and like, and we were all scared about it. And then a couple days later, a woman was coming out of her house, and in Myrtle Beach, in the area, there's houses on stilts, you know, because of the ocean and stuff like that. And this woman was coming out of her front door, and she was coming down, and a guy that was in a black robe or whatever cut her Achilles tendon and made her fall down the stairs. And I remember clear, we were getting notes from the office where we lived and stuff like that to keep your kids inside, away from the woods. Like we weren't supposed to go back into the wooded area, you know, because the police were having a hard time finding these people.
So they were like in a cult or something.
Yeah. And I mean, that was pretty big, but you know, in the 80s, early 90s and stuff like that, you know, occultism wasn't, you know, like I remember like when we used to go in the closet or whatever to get board games or whatever, you know, you'd
Mhm.
have Monopoly, you'd have Shoots and Ladders and stuff like that, and you would have a Ouija board right there,
Mhm.
you know.
I had a
And
Ouija board.
yeah, I
I
know.
had the Parker Brothers one.
Yeah, I don't think anybody didn't have a Ouija board,
Yep.
you know, and it was like, you know, more people looked at it like a game. Um, but what are your thoughts, you know, on a Ouija board and like using it for spirit contact like that? You know, what are your thoughts behind that?
So, getting back to the pentagram, a pentagram can also be used for protection as well. A lot of, practices uses it as well. But as far as a Ouija board, I honestly, during that time as well, I was using a Ouija board, and I, was the basic Parker Brothers one. And again, I didn't know how to use it. I started asking the board questions, trying to get in touch with my grandmother that just passed. And I thought I was honestly talking to her, but then all of a sudden it kind of turned and I knew I wasn't talking to her anymore. I abruptly stopped using it, but that I didn't close the portal before just exiting out of it. So that was another thing as well. Like maybe I brought something in. A lot of people don't believe in it. It's just a game. I personally am more comfortable with a pendulum than a Ouija board because I feel like I can control it better. The pendulum, I just feel like the Ouija board just, I don't know, like it's like it'll open up something if you don't know how to use it.
Yeah,
But
because
a
you
lot of
don't know
people
what you're
do use it all the
communicating.
time. A lot
Yeah.
of people use it all the time and they're completely comfortable with it. I just personally am not comfortable with it. Or if I want to use it in the future, I would like to actually be taught on how to use it,
Yeah, I don't use them. You know, my wife had a really bad experience when she was growing up.
Mhm.
Her and her friend were playing a Ouija board, and the girl's mom came into the room with them and says, "Oh well, if this thing is real, you know, ask it how long I have to live."
Mhm.
And it spelled out 3 months, and I think it was like 2 or 3 days before the 3 month mark, and they found her dead.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if you're asking, you know, from what I understand, from what I've heard about Ouija boards, there's a few things you're not supposed to do with them. You're not supposed to ask them when you're going to die. You're not supposed to communicate inside of a graveyard with a Ouija board. Have you heard these things too?
Mhm. Yes,
And
yes.
I know many people that do, and a lot of Susan, a lot of the cases that I work that are people that are around my age or a little bit older and stuff like that. A lot of the things that they're experiencing into their adulthood are because, you know, they played Ouija board, they had seances, and they had things like
Mhm.
that.
And they
And
probably didn't know how to do it or
right,
didn't really didn't have any guidance on how to do it. See, that's the problem. If you're going to be, experiences with like all these things, you need to know how to do it, or at least have somebody with you that could teach you and guide
mhm.
you.
Yeah, that's interesting because, um, you know, one lady that I had a case on, it actually, her mom and dad were having a seance, and she was a little girl, and uh, she came out of her room and she saw her parents holding hands and or had her hands on the table or something like that, and they were all chanting something. And she remembers it clear to this day. The table came up in the air and then it slammed back down. And she said that her family had experienced, you know, very malevolent paranormal activity ever
Mhm.
since. And that was a pretty rough case, you know, because, you know, with me, I have a theory that, you know, if a tree is producing bad fruit, then you don't stand underneath and watch it produce bad fruit. You quit looking at the fruit and examine the root. Well, some of those roots for those issues go back a lot further than just them, than their parents and things like that. Generational ties, stuff like that, you know, has to be cut off, you know, and it has affected a lot of people, you know, and like people ask me, you know, what are your thoughts? And look, I don't have anything against people that use Ouija boards. I don't. I don't use them. They don't work for me. It contradicts in the belief that I have. But if it works for you and things work for you, like what you do, you know, Susan, I think you're kind of eclectic. I mean, I don't.
Nobody knows what I am.
I think you are, because you know you kind of have the you know, the psychic and I mean, look, I love the way that you dress. You have to tell us about the way that you dress. What made you start dressing like that? Because you have one of the most unique looks, you know, when it comes to being on a show or something like that, and not many people dress like that. Tell us about that, your dress up, your stuff you got going on there.
When I first, you know, started my podcast, I was going for like the Victorian like era, because I was, for some reason, I can't read myself. So I had a couple of people read me, and all of them basically said I was back in the medieval era, like during the Viking era, as well as I was also had a past life in the Victorian era.
Wow.
So I've been always fascinated in the medieval era, you know, like the, you know, Renaissance and the Vikings. A big historical buff for that. But I'm also like, I love like the Victorian era, like the classical, like Victorian houses and, you know, like the wallpaper, stuff like that. I really enjoy it. So I don't know. It's just like one day I was like, you know, I have to do something different. And, you know, and then it just, you know, down to me, well, you know, why don't I go into character? And then, you know, I started Googling and trying to figure out, you know, what really fits for me. So basically the name kind of like represents everything combined all together. But then I've also, you know, when I first met my spirit guides, because I also draw face portraits as well. So I
what do you mean? Like, are they portraits for people or?
No, I actually, if I see like spirits or people coming to me, I could draw them. So I actually drew a picture of my spirit guide. I drew a picture of her great grandfather, and you know, my spirit guide is Native American. And then, you know, I just started, you know, drawing pictures, and I was like, you know, what do I see myself? And then I was also, you know, a lot of people think as well, you know, just looking at me, I'm somebody that, you know, tampers with dark magic or, you know, things like that. Like I'm just like, not like the Antichrist, but like, you know, something like really dark. But in all honesty, you know, I tell people what you see in the outside is not what is in the inside. So I'm completely different from the inside.
Susan, you are a beautiful person. You're such a good person. And I really hope and pray that people don't judge you like that. Because even though you dress, I mean, like I'll be honest with you, like when I first saw you, and I was like, wow, dude, she looks dark. But to get to know you is totally different, and you're definitely not. And I think it's just very unique the way that you look. I think the way that you carry yourself, you know, the way that you talk and with people. I mean, you know, you're just a wonderful person. And
yeah. And I honestly, you know, I see myself, I tell everybody, you know, even though I dress dark in the outside, I truly think I'm like a white gleam of light in the inside. That's how I feel, you know, like my goal is to actually, you know, because I just opened up a new network, Wonders of the World Network. And my goal is to actually create a podcast for people that had the same issues as me, like feeling isolated. If they do feel like they have abilities or, you know, something that they can understand, you know, my podcast would get a whole bunch of people together and try to help them through it. And that's my goal, is to help people.
Yeah, that's mine, 100%.
You know, and that's what, you know, my focus is. You know, I want to take my podcast and travel around the world when I'm able to, you know, see the different cultures, see the different religions, history. I mean, that's my goal as well. So
you were talking about like Renaissance and stuff like that. You know,
yes.
I'm a Knights Templar.
Yes.
You know, so I mean, you can see the shirt and everything that I'm wearing now, the ring. I mean, I've got, you know, I am a part of the Order of the Archangels, and you know, there's people have a bad misconception even with them, because you know how many times I get asked, "Are you affiliated with Freemasons?" or "You're," you know, things like, and we're not. Actually, it's in our bylaws that we have no affiliation with Freemasons. We have none of that. We are a church. We are a sanction of defending Christianity. And I think there is a difference there. And you know, and that's what leads me, you know, when I'm talking to you about witchcraft and stuff like that, you know, people practice what they call white magic and stuff like that. How can you know if it is, and like, if people are doing magic, I mean, how can you like separate it and know that, oh, this is white magic and this is black magic and stuff like that? Do they work
I tell, and Laura, thank you so much. Laura's a sweetie as well.
Hey,
I always could tell if somebody's like not who they say they are. I could, you know, or if they're, you know, practicing, you know, a type of witchcraft, or I generally know, which is odd, but I generally do know. Or if somebody, you know, if I'm meant to come in somebody's life to help them. You know, like, I know there's a rhyme and a reason why, you know, you come into somebody's life either to help them, or, you know, or something that they're going through, just to help them through that. And then there's a time that you leave their life, you know, and you let them be on their own, you know. So, you know, but I do know generally when somebody is, you know, either practicing, or, you know, something's not right about them, or, you know, so.
Is it easy for someone who says that they practice white magic or whatever it is to cross over into that side? Do they already like have the gears to like, say they get angry, or somebody makes them mad? I mean, can they cross that barrier?
I mean, if you're truly practicing white magic and it's for purity and for good, it has to take a lot for them to cross over, I would think, to the other side.
Can I give an example?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Say somebody's into white magic. And also, if you have abilities, you can tell if somebody's good or bad. You may fight it, you may second guess yourself, but you can. But if somebody is truly into white, pure, anything, say, and I hate to even bring this up, say somebody kills somebody they love on purpose, or, you know, DUI, and you get so angry, sometimes it'll build up and it just comes out as bad. I mean, it's, if you can't ground yourself, then it just happens.
Can't let it take over. Yes, if you go to that extra length and do harm, then you're crossing over, definitely.
Mm.
But
And
hopefully,
some don't mean to. Some don't.
No,
yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah. And
okay.
hopefully you have like your spirit guides or others around you that kind of like guide you, like
Yes.
to stay focused and in that right direction.
Well, you said something very interesting there. You said some don't mean to, but I mean, if they
Okay.
do the crossing over like that, say they get angry at somebody, or a girl makes them mad or something like that, and you're used to doing some kind of spells for good things, enchantments and things like that, and then you go do that. I mean, can it really mess up the way that you practice
It
by
can.
doing bad stuff?
It can, because now you're going into a different type of witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're stepping over the guidelines. A pure witchcraft, even like Wiccan, Celtic, pure witchcraft, you don't do any harms to others. Black magic, black witchcraft is when you do curses, hexes, you hurt people, you put a bound on them. That's the other end of witchcraft.
Mm, mm. That's interesting, and another thing, let me ask you this. Do you think that witchcraft, the darker side of witchcraft, plays a lot of influence in our government today?
Hmm. Hmm.
Good question.
That's a good thought. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm asking you what are your thoughts behind that, because I know I have my own as far as Illuminati, things of that nature, because there are sanctions of people that are supposedly in government officials that clearly practice rituals and things like that. And
Hmm.
I mean, have you ever heard that?
I have not. No, I have
Well,
not. I could
I
see,
have.
I mean, I
Yeah.
could see it going on. Definitely.
mhm. It can definitely, it definitely, I think the influence there, and I think another thing that's real big on influence and the way that people believe it or not, is music. A lot of times when people, listen to certain kinds of music, there's like subliminal messages and stuff like that they can say. I mean, there's so many songs. I used to have a series that I used to watch. It's called "They Sold Their Souls for Rock and Roll," and this pastor went and he looked at different songs, and it's clear. He goes, that's exactly what the devil wants you to do, because the devil was an angel of music.
Hmm.
The devil was an angel. So what better way to manipulate and be able to get to people than through something that is repetitive? So they said, before you know it, you're singing and you're chanting and you're saying these things, and you can invoke bad things into your life through that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. I mean, there's a lot of songs that have, you know, that have a
Mhm.
lot of like, concerning words or, yeah.
They do.
I mean, even Queen, that the Bohemian Rhapsody, clearly has a demon's name right in that
Mhm.
song.
And
Right
I
in.
like Queen.
Mhm. Yeah, and if you I mean, there's a demon's name now with white magic and stuff like that you guys do, or that are affiliated. What are your thoughts on demons and demonic forces and stuff like that?
Like I said before, I mean, I haven't actually encountered a demon. And my experience from what I had, I don't know if it was myself that was causing, manifesting, negativity around me. It, but I honestly feel that there has to be, it has to be balanced. The world has to be balanced. It has to be good, and then it has to be bad. True. You know, it can't be mostly good and very little bad. It has to be balanced. So, you know, is there actually a devil? I honestly cannot say, because I haven't come across it.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. There's a devil. Mm-hmm. There's a devil. And I mean, if you look at, you know, Lucifer himself was a very high-ranking angel. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he thought that he could sit on God's throne, and he says, you know, I can do everything that you can do. And not only did he think and believe that he could do it, he convinced a third of God's angels, which are demons today. And it's very clear that when he was cast out of heaven, he was cast down to earth. So a lot of the things that go on, like a lot of things that the influence that the devil has had, you know, like I said, I work a lot of cases too. And, you know, out of all the cases that I work, you know, 1% may be demonic. Mm-hmm. But like you said, mental health plays a big issue. You have to rule all that stuff out too. But the devil is an influencer on things. I mean, you think you know, divorces, addictions, alcoholism, you know, anger, domestic violence, things of that nature. You know, it may not have like a demonic name behind it, but there is a demonic influence behind that actually leads those people in that direction. Yeah. And it's you know, I've never seen it either. I mean, I have seen someone demonically possessed. I have. It's and when I did see him, it was inside of a church. And when the worship music started to come on, the guy that was standing right behind me, his eyes turned completely jet black. His chair that was right behind him where he was standing flew against the wall. He fell onto the floor. His body started contorting, you know, into different, like he was trying to raise himself up with his hand like this on the ground. I mean, like it just, and the sounds and the things like this. And like I said, there's characteristics of a demon that you could know what you're dealing with. If you hear like 4 or 5 different voices coming out of them, if they're speaking a different language that they've never spoke before, if they know things about you that you've never told anything, you know, that's ways that you can actually know that there is that's a demon present.
So it's not necessarily true that they don't enter a religious place.
Oh, they 100% do, because in the book of Revelation, it talks about the 7 churches. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the biggest battles that Satan is going to try to do, because Satan, what he wants to do is he wants to get in and destroy the church from the inside out. So he has to be inside of that. We are called the temple of God. We are God's ultimate creation. So what would the devil do to destroy anything that God has? To destroy them from the inside out. That's why when people, they get demonic infestation, then it goes to demonic oppression, and then oppression to possession. It happens so fast because the enemy, the devil's goal is to absolutely control and destroy you from the inside out. And that's the same thing that he wants to do inside the churches too. Absolutely. Let me ask you this. I'll get off because we can talk about this, and you've already had this.
Gone into cryptids, or look at that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what
an hour is already gone, you guys.
I know, time flies.
And I enjoy it. I can ask you, and I was going to ask you about cryptids. Like, what are your thoughts on cryptids, Susan? What do you think about that? Because my wife and I were just having a conversation the other day, you know, about Bigfoot and stuff like that. And it's like, you always wonder, like, why hadn't more people seen them, or why haven't they found like skeletal bones from one if they've been around this long? You know, what are your thoughts?
A lot of people think I'm crazy and I'm nuts, but I honestly feel that they're living among us today. I feel that they, you know, we could have them, right, you know, like you and I, they could have adopted to looking like us, adopted to our lifestyle. And then I just feel like when the time comes, they're going to like present themselves.
So why do you, so basically what you're saying is that they have adapted to what we are, and then they'll be exposed to who they are later on. Well,
because
how about Bigfoot?
I strongly feel that the Earth is going to go through a dramatic transformation. You know, and during that time, there's going to be like people like us that will need to like guide people on what they need to do. And I also feel that in that same realm, we're actually going to start seeing more and more like people, you know, like other forces of nature. You know, I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, they discover like new fish that they haven't seen before. They discovered like animals that, you know, are just coming out now that they'd never seen before. Victor and I are going Bigfoot hunting. Yes, this summer.
What's up, Victor? How are you, bud?
Yeah, that's my feeling. And a lot of people don't agree with me. A lot of people think I'm nuts. But that's how I've been feeling all along. So
I think it's very interesting. You know, I've been in people's yards. I live in South Carolina, and I mean, people have like what they call little fairy gardens, and like in like people put gnomes and stuff in their yard. There's significance behind that too.
Yeah.
Right, but people like really do. And I think of fairies, you know, like what's the first thing you think about when you hear somebody talk about fairies?
Like little
Tinkerbell.
pixies, like little pixies. And, you know, although, you know, who's to say
that's what
fairies,
I used to think too.
I mean, fairies could be regular size. How do we know that they're not just like regular size? You know, it's, you know, people just have, you know, look at the Tinkerbell and just automatically assume that they're these tiny little fairies floating around, you know,
little cute little girls that are just floating around with these little mouse voices and stuff like that. Yeah, my team director, he's an elementalist. He's really like he like really has a thing with nature. Like he feels things in nature that a lot of people don't, and he's able to actually grab pictures of stuff, and he goes, I got a picture I want to show you, and he circled around it, and I looked at this picture and I could not believe what I saw, and it's clear as day, and you can see it right there, right in the middle of this picture he took. You can clearly see a little fairy. And it's just this little, I mean, you can see it. I mean, it's got the legs, it had the arms, all kind of stuff like that. And he sensed and he knew that it was there. I've always been interested in stuff like that, you know, because there's people here in South Carolina that have those fairy gardens, and they say that at nighttime, that's when they come into these little gardens.
Being like all lit up and
Yeah, people do them. What is?
Okay.
Yeah,
it's an hour and 5. So we need to get off in the next 5 minutes. I'm so sorry, you guys. I know it's a good conversation. I know.
Oh yeah, I love conversations like this because it can go it can go everywhere.
Susan just has to come back. Yes.
Yeah.
Part 2, part 3, part 4,
7, 8, 10. Yeah.
I definitely do. Well, Susan, why don't you tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and how they can reach you?
Yep. So, you know, reach out to me. My Facebook is Susan Victoria. Central Mass Paranormal, Central Mass Happy Hour Paranormal is my other Facebook page. I'm on Central Mass Paranormal Society on YouTube. My new network is up and running, Wonders of the World Network, where I invite everybody, you know, into a drama-free network that can stream through. Plus, I'm actually working on a project with a friend of mine, a YouTuber, and we're actually bringing my character to life and actually creating a YouTube miniseries.
That's amazing.
Well, so that's going to be basically like the story of my life, which we kind of got into earlier, and we're actually going to bring it to life. So that's going to be exciting.
That's awesome. And you know, please share that stuff on, you know, Outer Realms Paranormal, Nationwide Paranormal.
All
please share. Yeah,
yes,
all access.
And I'm also Victor and Denise Pounds is actually trying to get Vampires Vendetta up and running. I have a small role in that as well. And as well as Denise's other movie that she wants to get up and running, Pagan. So I have a short roles to play next year in filming as well.
Congratulations.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Hey, Susan, it's been a blast having you on, and I definitely want to have you back because I have so many more questions to ask you. You know, I haven't even gotten into the vampires or
I know.
I mean, like, I didn't get into any of that, but it was so good having you here, and I really appreciate you coming on. And it's always a blast talking to you. Absolutely. And it was great being on your show, and I knew I wanted to get you on mine, but I really thank you for coming on.
Absolutely, anytime.
All right,
drop you in the back for a minute if you just hang on. Let's
plan to do a part 2 on this too, because I have more questions for you.
All right,
Susan, you take care. Okay.
All right, when you get done, Shane, you can talk to her in the back. Just hold on, don't hang up. Okay.
Guys, see, it's so everybody knows that on my podcast, you know, I try to bridge the gap between paranormal and clergy. Yep. And somebody like Susan, she's such an open person. She's such a good person, and she's a perfect example of don't judge a book by its cover. Yep. You know, and it's so important that we have that in our lives, that we really try to look to see who a person is before we judge them by the way they look, by the way they act, stuff like that. You know, because she's such a good person, and I thank each and every one of you for being here. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for everybody for watching. I've got another good show next week. You guys definitely want to tune in. But
tell them who, because it's going to be
no. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that yet. No. But you guys are definitely going to want to, because these are some awesome people. But I thank you again. And you guys stay safe and be blessed always, and stay spooky, people. Peace.